Welcome to another video here for Unit 1. This one's going to be rounding our multiplication and division answers. So whenever we're doing math problems that include multiplication or division, we're taking a look at how to round out those answers using our rules of significant figures. So hopefully this little tutorial will help you kind of do some of those problems to go with Sig Fig worksheet number 2. So let's take a look at our rule. So right here we have our rule written out, and we'll go through an example and then we'll do 2 problems, and that should take us through it. Our rule says we want to take our answer that we do, and we want to round that to the smallest number of significant figures that we pretty much started with. So whatever we used in our calculation. And I have 3 simple steps that we can kind of follow through here, kind of look at and go through this. The very first step says determine how many sig figs each number in your calculation has. So let's take a look. All you're really doing with this step, guys, is you're going to count how many sig figs does this have and how many sig figs do I have here. That's all. There's no math involved here. So we're just going to use those rules of the Atlantic and the Pacific to kind of figure out how many sig figs each number in our calculation has. So this first one, I have 5.6311. What I want to take a look at is whether I have the decimal present or absent and count up my sig figs. My decimal is present, therefore I'm coming from the left side, the Pacific side, and moving across the slate, the first non-zero number. That's the first number here, the 5. That number and every number after that is significant. If you're having trouble figuring this out, then you got to go back and watch some of those other videos. But this number right here has 5 sig figs. So this has 5 sig figs. When I look at my other value here, 2.3, again the decimal is present, so I'm going to be coming across it from the left side, the Pacific side. Moving across this, I see that the 2 and the 3 are both significant. So this value here has 2 sig figs. So that is step number 1. Just taking a look at both numbers that we had and taking a look at how many sig figs they have. Step number 2 is actually doing the math. Nothing tricky here. You guys should be able to do this. You guys can use your calculators just to punch these 2 numbers in. All you're going to do is enter in your calculator 5.6311 times 2.3. When you punch that in, you should get this as your answer, 12.95153. So no tricky steps there, just entering that stuff in. Now we're going to combine steps 1 and 2. So we just finished step number 2, just doing the math. Step number 3, this is our final step, is just going to be taking those 2 steps and kind of blending them together to figure out how we're going to round our answer. Our rule was that we want to have the lowest or the smallest number of sig figs that we used when we started with. So when we look at step 1 here, this one had 5 sig figs to start with, this one had 2 sig figs to start with. So in step number 3, we have to round to the lowest number of sig figs, which was 2. So my answer needs to be rounded to 2 significant figures. Let's look at this and kind of figure this out. If I'm going to round to 2 sig figs, I'm going to underline the first 2 digits. I'm going to look at the digit just to the right. I'm going to follow those rounding rules that we looked at. If you're having trouble with rounding, go back and watch the rounding video or talk to myself at some time where you guys can kind of get some help with this. So when I look at this number to the right of the second digit, which is a 9, that tells me that I got to round up. So my 2 is going to become a 3, and then every number after that is going to get dropped off. So 1, the 2 becomes a 3, so I have 3, and then every number after that becomes zeros. So I want to have all of these become zeros here. So that's rounding this, but now it says we want to have 2 sig figs in our answer. Well, if I leave this decimal and all these zeros here, I have a lot more than 2 sig figs, right? If I leave it just the way it is, right now this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This has 7 sig figs in my answer. I don't want 7 sig figs. I only need to have 2 sig figs. So I actually have to go back into here and get rid of some of those zeros there. They're just rounded off to 13. I'm dropping off those extra zeros so that I only have 2 sig figs in my answer. That's what my answer is. So, taking a look at how we do this one more time. Your first step is just look at the numbers that you're going to be multiplying or dividing and figure out how many sig figs each of them has. This one had 5, this one had 2. Your second step is just do the math. Enter it into a calculator, figure out what that multiplication or division problem, what the answer would be. Not that hard. The third step then is just looking at the lowest number of sig figs that you started with and rounding the answer that you had to that lowest number. So I had to round this, which I punched in my calculator, to 2 sig figs because that was the lowest number that I started with. Hopefully that makes sense. We can take a look at two more practice problems here and kind of sum this up. So in this example, I have 17.3875 times 2.0. So let's go through and kind of take a look at these three steps. My first step, again, was to take a look and figure out how many sig figs I have in each piece. So 17.3875 times 2.0. Step number one, count up the number of sig figs. My decimal's present in this one, so I'm coming across this on the left side. The first number that I hit is a non-zero number, so that number and every number after that is significant. So this value right here has 5 sig figs. Going to my second digit here, this one also has a decimal, so I'm going to come across the left side. The 2.0, this has 2 sig figs. So that's step number one, just figuring out how many sig figs each value that I have is going to contribute. Step number two, do the math. So 17.3875 times 2.0. I'm going to punch this into the calculator. I'm going to figure this out. When I do that, my answer is just revealed up there. My answer was 34.775. No tricky parts, just do the math. Step number three, look at which value is lower for the number of sig figs that I started with. So out of these two values, in step one I had 5 and 2. 2 is lower. I need to take my answer here and now round this to only 2 sig figs. So 34.775, let's take a look. I'm going to underline 34.775. I'm just going to write it one more time and just do this under here. I'm going to underline the first two digits that I want. That's how many sig figs I want. I'll look at the number just to the right. I see that that number is 5 or greater. It's a 7. So that means that this 4 that I have there is going to have to round up to a 5, and every number after that's going to become 0. Remember, I only want to have 2 sig figs here. If I leave all these zeros, this is giving me right now 5 sig figs. So when I rounded all these to zeros afterwards, what I actually have to do is drop these zeros off so that I have only 2 sig figs in my answer. That's what I want. That's what it is. So this one right here, being rounded, would be 35. So 17.3875 times 2.0, this is the actual calculation. Rounding this to the appropriate number of significant figures, my answer would be 35. Let's take a look at another example. In this one, I have 1.4600, and I'm actually dividing this by 96.1. Right? Let's take a look at each of these and figure out how many sig figs I have in each of those values to start out with. That's step number one. So 1.4600, my decimal's present, so I'm going to be moving across it from the left side, the Pacific side. I'm going to move across this. I'm going to see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this has 5 sig figs. This value has 5 significant figures to it. 96.1, again, I'm moving across this from the left side because the decimal's present. The first value that I hit is a non-zero number, so that number and everything after that is significant. So 96.1 has 3 sig figs to it. So step number one is done. I've just calculated how many, or just determined how many sig figs each value has. Step number two, you got to do the math. So 1.4600 divided by 96.1, right? See my answer up here. Just punch this into the calculator, you guys would get 0.0151925, and actually it continues on for quite a while, but we don't need to carry all those decimals because we're not going to need them all, because our answer has to be rounded to the lowest number of sig figs that we started with in our calculation. So let's determine what that is, right? 1.460, that had 5 sig figs. 96.1, this had 3 sig figs. So my answer here needs to get rounded to 3 sig figs. So let's take a look at this. My answer was 0.0151925. I want to round this to 3 significant figures. So I'm going to underline the first 3 digits that are significant. and that's the 1, the 5, and the 1. I'm going to take a look at the number just to the right of that. That's this 9. If it's 5 or greater, I have to round up, which it is. So my 0.015, that last one's going to become a 2 because I have to round up, and everything after that's going to become zeros. Now again, you got to check your answer to make sure that you have the appropriate number of sig figs. I want to have 3 sig figs in my answer. The way that I currently have this written, I have, moving across this, I got to go till I hit the first non-zero number. So right now I currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sig figs. So the way that this is currently written, I have 6 sig figs. So when I rounded this up here and I added all those zeros on there, what I actually have to do is drop those off so that my answer only has 3 sig figs. So my answer for this problem is 0.0152. So doing the math here, this is what you would actually get. Rounding that to the appropriate number of significant figures, it can only have 3 because that's the lowest value. It should be 0.0152. Hopefully that helped you guys out. 3 little quick sample problems. If you're having trouble with this, feel free to post something in our forum. Make sure that you ask myself or another classmate and get the help you guys need to get the grade that you guys want. Good luck.